Hello, dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Life of Love, where we gather in curiosity, compassion, and love to live every day to our best ability, whatever it looks like for today. And that's the secret, is knowing every day is going to be a little different. So thank you for being here and listening, my faithful guests, and my faithful audience. And I have a special guest. She's so on my heart. Kelly Bonhoeff is here, and she has been in the field of helping heal trauma for over 35 years. And recently she's been inspired to share in a different way. And she's going to share her trauma healing techniques and also her resource, which is her book and her mission. And I'm so delighted to bring forth this message. Kelly, thank you for being here on Life of Love. I'm just so thrilled to explore this topic with you.
Thank you, Julie, for the invitation. I'm excited.
Oh, well, I am too. And I was reading your book. It's a lot. So if anyone is interested in family trauma, toxic healing and bonding type things, it's a definite resource. It's not something you're going to scan and put down. This is a resource you're going to come back to. But I'm really excited. You created like this roadmap for healing trauma. And actually that's the name of the book. It's What's Going On with My Family, a roadmap to healing trauma, unlocking your hidden power, and remembering what is sacred. So, I don't think what could be more in line with Life of Love. So this is just going to be a wonderful episode. I hope everyone sticks around to the end, because there's going to be some great things and resources on your website. So just really excited. So I just want to get into it with you.
Let's do.
Because Dr. Kelly, you laid out so clearly. Yeah, you laid out clearly. You're like, your family story is the beginning of your journey, not the destination. So that is just it's a great perspective. And I would love for you to share how you came up with that, because I'm sure when you entered this 35 years ago, you might not have had that same perspective. So can you shed some light on how you came to that idea that, family trauma is your journey. It's the beginning. I'm just delighted to have you share that.
Yeah, so my journey started, my family and I parachuted in to our storyline, our timeline, our world line, which is where we were all kind of put together. And remember that I'm coming from the lens of spirituality, which is we are souls. Basically, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. When I was a little girl, one of my first memories or impressions was of my mother on the ground, unconscious. And as I was crawling toward her, I was like, I wonder what's going on here. And she wasn't waking up, and I just laid my body over hers, just hoping she would wake up and show me her eyes so we could play. It's one of the very first stories I tell, called Through the Looking Glass. So that imprint, or that idea, of course, sparked an interesting journey for me as a soul. So the way this kind of started was I picked up on that energy I call the Shark Tank energy, which everything kind of felt heavy and it wasn't quite sure where I was. But as I was a little girl, I had one question, and it was, why are children being hurt by those who had the opportunity to love them and keep them safe? So as I grew up, I became a nurse. And then through a series of journey moves and plot twists, I became a marriage and family therapist. But I was always interested in the child's beginning journey. So I really wanted to answer that question. But it wasn't until COVID happened and we had the pandemic pause, which I call the possibility of alignment to universal source energy, where I, as an essential worker, was prevented then from going into the foster care, into the schools, under the bridges, into the prisons, to see people or to see children and to make sure they were okay. And when I hit that stop, I fell absolutely apart, because my whole life had been about serving and healing. And so once I was stopped, I had that dark night of the soul, or that mental breakdown. And one day I went to acupuncture. I was in severe pain, never been to acupuncture. And when I had those needles put in, they opened up my energy system. and I had a dream that night.
Mm.
And what happened was all the energy, all the debris began to move. And through those 3 years, I had an opportunity to see or come at a very high level of perspective that I'd never had before, because I'd been on the ground and I was looking around and there was so much suffering, I couldn't see through it. So forest for the trees. So where the idea of your family is only the beginning of the journey, not the destination, is one of many dreams or many perspectives that I had had. That being, when we're on the ground and we're just trying to get through the day, we don't have an opportunity to have any spaciousness or stillness. And so as I was able to have dreams and have some of these beautiful insights or downloads begin to come through, what I realized going through in my dreams and in some of my out of body experiences, I was able to actually be in the pre-planning meetings with my family and their higher selves to get a sense of, oh, we actually we actually had the plan long before we were all ever incarnated. And so the beginning was this beautiful constellation, combination, and configuration of the souls of my mother, father, myself as oldest, and the 3 siblings. And what was it? Not just as the individual soul that we were trying to heal, but what as the unit of souls were we trying to heal? And that was how that particular idea came about.
Wow. So you in the through a dream that you had these soul conversations with your family?
Yes.
I
Those
love it.
dreams came a little bit
I love
later.
it. I
The
lately
very first dream was me
yeah.
just realizing that I was a spiritual being having a human experience. Now that in and of itself blew my mental mind, because I'm a scientist by training in 2 different disciplines. And my rational linear
Mhm.
mind was like, what do you mean? Why do you even, what's the dream thing going on? So in the book, the story is me, myself, and I am. So it's the story of that dream so that people can understand what really shifted in that first dream. And then the gifts began to come over a series of around 3 years.
Mm. And I love that these are themes that are repeated time and time again. And if you hadn't been involved in a spiritual community, there's symposiums online you can attend, and I did a ton of them. I read a ton of books, and so that idea, I've heard it, but you had no idea. So I'm so excited that this is something brand new to you, and you came to it in a dream, and then you can look at all these other resources, these spiritual people who have the same idea, and these reoccurring themes are like, yes, 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 that's what you're supposed to pay attention to. Don't pay attention to these noises. And I read through the looking glass in your book this morning, and was your mom, did she have a seizure? Did she ever wake up? I mean, I'm just holding your little child body in my consciousness thinking, how long did you have to suffer just laying over her and protecting her? I was just like,
Yeah, it's one of those cliffhanger stories, but it gives people a good sense of kind of my soul's path, the very beginning of the path, right? And so, yes, my mother did wake up, and she
oh,
had
good.
some themes that she wanted to walk through that I, as her little girl, didn't understand. So what happened was, because I'm an empath,
Hmm.
which I didn't know about energy, I didn't know about any of it. So what happened was, I actually, as I put my body over hers, or I was near anybody in my family, my father. So in my mind, what I did was I just needed to keep my mother healthy, my father happy, and my siblings safe. I almost said my children, because they were my children. So there was an
Yeah.
ancient traumatic pattern within this lineage that we all came to act out, giving ourselves the opportunity to live through and then end the cycle. So it took me a minute to figure out, well, what had our family actually come to learn together? And then what I realized was, this is what humanity is actually healing: the wound of separation, the wound of judgment,
Mm-hmm.
and the wound of self-honoring, which is, love, compassion, forgiveness, trust, and care for self, family, others, and of course, nature. So these are the key wounds that humanity is healing as 8.5 billion. Within our family units, though, there's this beautiful dance going on. So as an individual heals, as family generations heal, we exponentially begin to increase the consciousness of all our human family. And as we're ascending, then that's the beauty of the genius of our families, that they don't even recognize. They believe they're broken. So we use words like toxic and dysfunctional. So
Mm-hmm.
very disempowering words. In this particular book, I turn and reframe it completely to nothing but empowerment. Our families are here to heal,
Mm-hmm.
unlock, and remember, and are part of the ascension and healing of humanity itself. Whoa, what is it we're actually here to do? Right? So that's a very interesting and new way of seeing the pain, suffering, survival, struggle of families. So that's the reframe that I bring, is this more empowered narrative.
Mm. And it's just so it when you look at it that way, it's like, oh, it makes so much more sense because when you have a baby, you love this being, you want to protect it, and then you can see that, that the family was just trying to protect you from something, or that there was this fear overlay, and it wasn't that they wanted you not to have your dreams, they just didn't want you exposed to things that could hurt you. And you can just have such a more functional lens about things that your parents did or didn't do. I mean, it's a beautiful, compassionate lens to look through, and I'm so excited to explore this with you. Gosh, and like to me, it's like when I was reading your book, I was like, you call it the Shark Tank, but what came into my head was it's like your soul decides to incarnate, and then you're dropped in a wilderness like a survivor story, like the reality TV show Survivor. You're just put here, you forget everything that your soul, your spirit knows, and you're put in the situation, and it's up to you to figure out what your journey is, what the lessons are. But so many times we forget that's part of it, is to explore that, and we might try to escape or deny or pretend everything's okay. And so you're giving people a framework to say, look at it, it's valuable, and it helps, you having this loving family that just wants to love, and it's just different ways to show love. And I know that there's abusive things, and there's child trafficking, and there's all kinds of really awful things that happen, in families. But it's all this path, and we sign up for it for whatever reason, and it's to remember. So it's just really fun to think about you set yourself up for these challenges, and nothing you're not here for anything that you weren't aware was going to happen at some point. So I love the perspective of the life review and that kind of thing. So I would love for you to talk about survival patterns in families. And do you notice reoccurring roles that maybe the listeners could identify with? I noticed you said you're the oldest girl in your family, and I'm sure there's some things that you've noticed through your career of different survival patterns. So just give us some light on that. I'm excited to hear
Yeah.
that.
So just a brief update on so I call lifetimes expressions of life. So another really important point about this is the moment I realized I didn't have a family life, that my family is life itself, was when I was able to kind of turn into this area of, well, wait a minute. If we're all infinite intelligence, pure love, and sacred energy having an experience, well, now I can ask different questions. So one of the things that I also went through in another expression of life was child trafficking. And I did experience that again in this lifetime. So I do just want to bring through
Wow.
this. The reason why I have had a devotion and a love for humanity, specifically children who have had that experience, is because what I discovered was that as I healed that particular wound, we hold energetic healing keys within us. So that even without me knowing anyone who has had a similar experience, I'm actually helping them to have the possibility of healing energetically. So it kind of moves through their subconscious mind, the possibility of moving in the direction of healing. So when one of the things that I think I'm meant to do is to talk about some of these harder wounds when it comes to things that happen with children young. One of the survival things I noticed, it's called the merry-go-round of survival. And I noticed it in my family and other families. And it's something like this. We get on the merry-go-round, we get into the shark tank of energy, and all that energy is kind of holding these limitations in place for us. The things we think, the speak, beliefs, emotions, feelings, and actions. And we're just trying to survive. We've got conformance. We need to survive before we can remember, right? So we have to go into the survival. So one of the things I noticed is we were on a merry-go-round of secrets, silence about those secrets, shame. The energy of shame is very intense. The shadows that come from those secrets, the sabotage, the status quo, and the suffering. So families were actually doing all of this thing. And it was a cycle that just kept repeating all the time. And I could pinpoint it across generations. So what I recognized is once you have to recognize you're on the merry-go-round first. If you believe there's a chapter in there about misconceptions of traumatized families, if you believe that you're just crazy and you're broken and this is just going to be the way it is, then you're not going to look for a pattern to interrupt. You're just going to say, this is just normal, which it's not. So you got to know you're on the merry-go-round first. And then I asked, well, how do you get off the merry-go-round? And I hear, oh, you don't ever get off the merry-go-round because everything happens in cycles. It just transforms to the merry-go-round of spirit. And so that's where you trade things like secrets for spaciousness or sabotage for serenity, or, you just kind of reframe and replace that. So that's the very first pattern I noticed within my own family. We had many secrets, and what happens in families stays in families. So this is way before Las Vegas, right? So if you have secrets, it starts that merry-go-round. And you just realize you're on it, and it stays there until you go, oh, yeah, I see that here. And what would I like to do about it? Because free will in the end is very, very important. And I think the other thing that's really on a lot of people's minds is, well, what if my family doesn't want to heal? What if they don't want to hear this particular perspective? Will they still be going with me into the next ascension or dimension or, consciousness? And the answer is, it's up to every soul. It's up to every family member. And that's kind of
we have free
part
will.
of it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's hard to hear. So it takes a while to get a sense of it.
So with this, yeah, well, especially like sexual things with children's, like with children, sex trafficking, that's a huge one to uncover.
It is.
And
Which is
the
why I
shame
think
and
I
all of
was meant
that.
to
So
bring that
you
into
had a
the light.
dream about it?
Um,
Yeah, and I usually don't talk about this on Life of Love, but it was on
I,
my heart. I don't know, it just came out of my mouth.
and that's okay, because part of what I think humanity is attempting to do is to bring everything that we do not prefer into the light to heal it. If we can't see it, we can't heal it. And one of the greatest wounds is this
Right.
trafficking. And everybody wants to dance around it a little bit. And I believe me when I tell you, I understand why. Having said that, it's important to bring it gently into the light so we can re-see it, we can heal it, and we can understand that for those of us who, as souls who came through that journey to heal it, that's an important part of the journey. The other part, though, is I wanted to get to a place where I could forgive and have compassion for and love the souls who played the villain in that particular storyline. So I asked my guides to please bring those higher selves of those who had played those roles so that I could see and understand what had we planned. What is it that's really going on here? Because I wanted to be free. I wanted to feel freedom for the first time in my life. And so I was able to be
And
granted that
forgiveness,
opportunity.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Kelly, but yeah, forgiveness is freedom, right? I mean,
Right.
you that soul, that person, that entity made that choice. And it's not for you to judge. And you're not saying it was okay. Like you're not saying you would do it or you're not applauding them, but you're just saying, well, that's your choice and you have to deal with the whatever the consequence. Like every action, every thought, everything has a consequence. So they have their own stuff to deal with. Like you don't have to own that. And I love how you said you get the key to you heal it in you and it's just part of the merry-go-round and you can trade it for the higher vibration. Everything has a continuum. So I just
Right.
love how you're bringing this forth and you know and I didn't bring forth child trafficking to condemn anyone because that's not my place. Would I, I would not make that choice. But, it's like it's out there and it's something we need to fix in our society. So, and fix maybe I don't know God's plan, but I do know it's healing, it's unconditional love, but
It's okay because the other
sorry.
thing that can happen here again that we're kind of expanding awareness is really all we're doing. So another perspective is
Hmm.
there are those that choose. So for me, I was the person who had something done. There was someone who was doing. So I call it harm versus harmony, right? What I discovered was there are those in the world whose
Hmm.
souls have gone into the shadows and who make a decision that is in harm. We need to remember, though, that we have free will, and at some point, we are making a decision to have a dynamic like this. When I went into the dream with those
Hmm.
who played the role of villain, what I learned was every single one who played villain had we had planned that because I wanted to heal from this wound in this lifetime. So they chose to play the villain. We had already set this up because they knew that as I healed the wound and as they're playing the villain, they have different healing keys than I do. So as I heal and I forgive, again, from a perspective of human and sacred, right? Well, now I'm not just freeing myself and anyone who's had this experience, but those who played villain are also a part of bringing this dynamic into what I call transformation. We're dissolving that particular lesson, if you will. But it's really healed from the perspective of everyone. So that means criminal justice, the child, what we term a perpetrator, all of that. Can we hold everyone in a space of love, forgiveness, and compassion? Because that is where that I think it's the final exam for us as humanity, is what I would say, is when we can hold the shadows and the light within our own arms and notice everyone is just learning here. We are all spiritual beings having an experience. And can I truly forgive myself, them, anybody else? Forgiving myself, that was another thing that I was like, why would I forgive myself? They're the ones who, you know, kind of came in my direction. Why would I forgive myself? And in the end, for me, it became I it was about the unforgiveness of myself. In other words, not having compassion for what I had been through, for being so hard on myself about it, right? And so for me, forgiveness was just a
Hmm.
key that allowed me to see things differently. I let it go. And now I what I call honor the experience because it allowed me literally to heal a theme that has been on my path for generations.
Mm. It's amazing. And I'm so happy for you because I feel the freedom in you
Yes.
and you know shouting this from the rooftops. I mean,
Yep.
it's transformative. So I just and and I think that it's easy to forget that without dark there cannot be light. And there are things that happen so that we can see that there's choice and that there's beauty and there's the beauty gets dulled until you see the lack of beauty. So everything has its place and although we'd make different choices and we would never wish anything harmful or wish darkness on anything or anyone, those things for some reason need to be healed. And so that's if you can just sort of tap around or feel around into the idea that you know these things are coming in so that you can work through them and you can change your family, that you can change you get the upgrade, the key that transforms this and brings our earth to a higher place. It not only helps you be more healthy and clear and happy and free, but also helps the whole world. So it's worth going there. And I realize this is tender and it's raw and it's vulnerable. So I honor however anyone needs to come at this. And I have a dear friend, Kathy O'Brien. I don't know if you've ever heard of her work, but she's really forgiven, and she was part of a psyop. She was part of a really dark um, thing involved in the government, and she was sworn to secrecy, but she was severely traumatized, and her story echoes a lot of your themes. And so I'm honored as a sister of healing and compassion and love to bring forth these messages of it's tough, but we're strong and we're still breathing, so we're doing something right. We're still trekking. We can choose to check out at any time. We're totally precious and vulnerable. Our lives are. So we're still here because we have more to work to do.
More work to do.
So
And
I
I
would
think,
love for you to talk about yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, more work to do. It sort of cut off. We have a little lag. I'll cut this out. So, Kelly, would you talk about sacred nature and what that means? Because that's a theme in your book too, is our ability to overcome and to connect with our sacred nature. So I'm sure this ties into all this forgiveness and it's just like a lot of really wonderful things. So yeah, I know that once I started to acknowledge that I was a sacred being, that God was in me, I showed up in a different way. So tell me how it came to you.
So, one of the things I noticed as I got really interested in this spiritual lens is that the word sacred kept coming into my dreams and downloads. And I looked around in our language and I'm like, where did the word sacred go? Like, where did the actual word go? Because I didn't see it a lot. People named it a lot of different things. But one of the wounds that we're healing is this unworthy, unlovable, and not enough. And those beliefs came and emotions came
Mm.
from our ancestors. And it's part of the karma that we're all healing. So when sacred kept coming to my mind, I realized sacred nature to me means worthy of unconditional love, devotion, and reverence. So our human nature and our sacred nature were always meant to dance and integrate. So we were always meant to awaken and remember, and then bring that beautiful sacred nature, which is worthy of unconditional love, into the human experience energetically, and then also in our thoughts and beliefs and actions. And so for me, the sacredness of life itself, we are life itself. When we look at the healing of separation, so there's a belief that whatever I say and do has no effect on what Julie's doing or what our children are doing or what somebody in another country is doing. And that's not true. We're all interconnected. So that's what sacred nature is. It's the true self being integrated and celebrated within our human experience. And I'm going to mess with the camera.
I'm with you, girl, 100%.
Yeah,
It's so
camera.
exciting, and you know, it just makes your life so not everybody's life is important. Everything feeds into the collective, and so the all is one, and remembering that all is one is a huge spiritual step. But I get it if someone's just trying to survive and make ends meet and avoid those sharks of separation, feeling
Right.
unworthy, those things you talked about, that it's and you talked about in your book, you're going from dimension to dimension. You don't accelerate to the fifth dimension and then never go back to the third dimension, or so you go in and out of these dimensions, and
Yep.
we do have to exist on this plane and survive to do our work, to live in love and joy, and choose that, and choose love, choose your divinity, choose to see that you are impactful. And the more you make those little choices, the more you're in the higher dimension and you're creating that. And so, Kelly, how did you know that now is the time as far as humanity? Because you wrote that that now this time in history is different in your book. So how did you know that?
Well, again, it took me a while. I didn't even know what love really felt like. I had dissociated so young that I was a highly functioning dissociative person. So I didn't feel my feelings. I had no idea what love felt like, or joy in my body, or peace, or beauty, or any of that. So I had to start again. I started at the beginning when I had this breakdown. And what I began to understand as I began to trust the flow of life itself. So I always felt that life was like I was just waiting for the next shovel to the face. I was resisting. So that familiar energy aligned with resistance or fear, was something that I live with every moment of every day. So as I learned to trust the flow of life, that I was life and I wasn't alone, I began to, with guides on the side. So it's important to know that I had a shaman, that I had psychics, that I had Akashic record readers. They were
Mm.
helping me along with my guides along the way to feel, and then to understand, and then understand dreams and visions and things like that. So how I began to understand that we were in another cycle, we were in the ascension cycle, came from dreams and visions, but also I was guided to specific information from specific channelers. And as I began to
Mm-hmm.
understand and then discern, because remember, I'm here to know what truth is for me, not to really take on someone else's truth. So as I learned and listened and took notes and had dreams and whatever, so it all kind of started to weave together. Then I was able to discern what it was that was the most important thing to share in each chapter. So I don't know that I really wrote this book. It feels to me like my higher self and other wisdom ascended masters and angels and others realized she actually is open, and I was able to heal and clear and get high enough in vibration to receive information. So that's how it all came to pass.
I can totally relate to that, because sometimes I open my book and I was like, "Oh, that was really good. I don't even that's not even my words. Like I just channeled it from something." And it's a
Yeah.
message like from your higher self. the collective needed you to write it down, so you wrote it down, and then the editor said, yes, we'll keep this. And it's just like this whole beautiful, beautiful tapestry of insight and love. And so, wow, I love that. I love how you described it. Thank you.
Sure.
And
You
then
know,
I did want to shout out your website and your star behaviors and just how moving those are, to use the acronym. You're really big on acronyms, and you said a few, and I hope I can catch them all.
yeah,
And I'll have them in the show notes. But yeah, in your fear acronym, can you repeat that, the fear acronym again? Because I want to highlight that.
yeah, the acronyms came in. I didn't, one day I looked around and I go, why am I talking like a fortune cookie? It's not even, it feels like, so the acronyms were coming. And I realized as the acronyms started to come that they were actually aligned with energy. So, in other words, the acronym in psychology for fear is different than the acronym for energy. And now I'm starting to do acronyms, but in through energy. So, fear is familiar energy
Mm.
aligned with resistance. So when we think of an individual or even as a family, we know what it feels like when we walk in somewhere and the energy is heavy. It's just heavy. And you're like, ooh, what's happening here? Right. So once I
Mm-hmm.
started to understand families as
Mm-hmm.
energy, now we've got a different language that we can talk to. And it brings us up a little bit. So we're not
Mm.
so enmeshed in the I'm a victim, my mother and father did or didn't do, or my uncle, or whatever that is, pulling us from a victim mindset into a growth mindset, into an evolutionary mindset. So it's just a very different way for families, if they choose to be able to look to the stars. And the reason why that came up was because when I was a little girl and I felt so not supposed to be here on the earth, I would look to the stars and they would bring me comfort. And so the STAR acronym came
Mm.
from that particular experience.
I love that. And the whole idea that it's energetic is it takes you out of taking it personally.
Right.
Like these things that happen, I'm sure if you went back and said, Mom, when you were on the floor and you didn't open your eyes, I'm sure she wouldn't say, well, I just wanted to teach you a lesson. You're just being so needy. I mean, she would, that's never, it's like, that's that it's just me, it'd be mean. But there's so many things in our childhood that if you look at it through an energetic and try not to take it personally, just try to understand, the whole picture, that as an adult you can take these childhood wounds, these inner child traumas, and you can really unpack them and be like, yeah, well, I was just taking it personally, or I misunderstood that situation. That's really not how it happened. And so energetically, I can see the power of that being so transformative. So thank you. And I agree. I look at the stars and I get always comforted by the stars. In fact, on a cloudy night, I sort of like try to imagine the stars so I can get that comfort. It's just
Yeah.
like part of my thing too. Maybe it's our Palladian ancestry. Maybe that's how we were brought together. I don't know, but it's exciting. It's exciting to know that there's more out there. We're here and we have our five senses, but we know that there's more. You can feel it, and I'm just so excited to share these wonderful, uplifting messages. And was there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience? Because we're coming up on our lovely time.
Here's what I'd like for families to know. The book would not have been born into the world if families weren't wondering what's going on and that they're ready to heal. And what I will tell
Mm.
you is that our families are healing every moment of every day. And please do not allow any other messages or noise that's coming through to create a sense of doubt of that in you. Just move toward your sacred nature and keep an eye out for the
Mm.
magic because it is there.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kelly. I really
Thank you.
appreciate this.
Thank you, Julie.
Sending all these families nothing but love and compassion, and we're cheering you on. Dr. Kelly and I are cheering these families on because
For
it's
sure.
worth it and you matter.